Hi guys, here we are for part 2 of our memory unit. Glad you're tuning back in. In this unit, we're going to talk about encoding, Ebbinghaus, and memory tools. It's going to be a little out of order on our note guide, so you might have to pause and flip around a little bit, but I'm sure you can handle it. Let me pull this up. Okay, first thing we'll start with is this idea that there's an information processing model that we go through 3 steps. Encoding is putting memories into our brain, storing is keeping them there, and retrieval is pulling them out. So remembering something involves all three. All three could work, or any one of them could not work, and then that would be why you don't remember something. So it's kind of like, I love these images. Keyboarding is putting something in, like encoding. Storing it on a disk is storage, and pulling it back up on the monitor is retrieval. Look at the size of that monitor from about 1995. Okay, encoding, getting information into memory. There's 3 types: semantic, acoustic, and visual. And so let's look at those 3 types. Semantic is encoding the meaning of verbal information by associating it with what you already know or imagine. So when you were a little kid, when you were probably 2 or 3 years old, you learned what a bicycle was, but you never saw a unicycle. You didn't learn what that was. When you finally do see a unicycle and your mom tells you what it is, you can remember it because you associate it with what a bicycle is. So that is processing the meaning of the verbal information. By the way, the way I remember semantic as meaning is that letters 2 through 5 in the word semantic spell, if you scramble them, it spells meaning. So you can unscramble the words and it spells meaning or means. At any rate, so semantic meaning can result in better recognition later on. Visual encoding is just what it sounds like, encoding a visual image. This can be really powerful because we all know the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Here's these 2 pictures of these women down here. If you were trying to make an advertisement to get teenagers not to smoke cigarettes, you could show the before smoking image and the after smoking image, and that would be very powerful. Kids would encode that, and they would remember that, and hopefully they would not smoke. Acoustic encoding. Acoustics is sounds. There's good acoustics in this room. There's an acoustic guitar. So acoustic encoding is remembering something that you hear. I think that's self-explanatory. There is an unusual phenomenon with this called the cocktail party effect. If you're in a big room where there's a party and there's people over here talking and a couple people there talking and a group of people here and here, if you just pay attention, you can kind of hear them all, but you can't understand everything they're saying. So the cocktail party effect is when multiple people are talking, you can only really pay attention to one voice at a time. So there's this famous guy who studied memory. He's like the memory guru, and his name is Hermann Ebbinghaus. And remember, in psychology, it's all about research. We don't know something unless we research it and prove it. So this guy was the first person to do a lot of basic memory research. And one of the things he learned was that effortful learning requires rehearsal or conscious repetition. And the more you rehearse or the more you study, the more you learn, which of course we know that now, but he proved it 100 years ago. So the way he did it was that he had people studying nonsense syllables like TUV, YOF, GEK, XOZ, and he would have them memorize these. And he would memorize nonsense syllables because he didn't want people's associations with words to help them remember stuff. Like if you had real words like cat and dog, people might remember those easier. So he used nonsense syllables so people wouldn't have any associations with the words. The more he found out, what he found out is the more time nonsense syllables were practiced, the fewer repetitions were required to remember them on day 2. And here's the graph of that, the time in minutes taken to relearn the list on day 2. He also noticed there were a couple of things that happened, a couple of effects. One was called the spacing effect. We retain information better when we rehearse over time. So if you're going to study for like a total of 30 minutes, if you space that out and go 10, 10, 10, and you study it 3 different times, you will remember more that way. He also noticed that something called the serial position effect, when your recall is better for the first and last items on a list and poorer for the middle items. And the serial position effect can be broken down into the recency and the primacy effects. The recency is if you study a list of 20 things and you study the numbers 18, 19, 20 most recently, they're the most recent things in your memory, you will remember them most. And the primacy is remembering the first things most. So the serial position effects is just when you put those two together. So what about studying? What are ways we can study and use this information we're learning about memory to get better grades? Yes, I would hope that you can. So here's a couple tips on getting better grades using memory techniques. One is the self-reference effect. Remembering something new in terms of how it relates to you, reminds you of something you've done, something you saw, some friends of yours, whatever. So thinking of terms of yourself, you can remember it better. Number 2, the method of loci. I don't think this is a great way, but ancient Greeks used this technique. They would picture themselves in a house going from room to room, and they would picture an object in each room, and that would help them remember those things. Maybe that works for you. Maybe just regular imagery, which is forming a vivid mental image of the thing you're trying to remember. That can be helpful. 4, I just mentioned this a couple slides ago, the spacing effect. Spacing out your studying over several nights rather than cramming it in the night before. So if normally you study for a test in math and you study for like an hour the night before, if you go 20 minutes a night for 3 nights, the exact same amount of time, you will remember more. And the biggest tip, this one, I did this in grad school because when I was in graduate school, I wanted to get better grades. And so I tried this. I would read over my notes the night I took the notes, which I had never done before because normally I would wait until the night before the test and I would read over my notes. But if you read over your notes the same day that you took the notes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that you're forming that memory. And then if you look at your notes again at 7 o'clock at night, you're consolidating that memory and you're really forming a memory on that first day, and that will help you tremendously. So if you're wanting to get better grades, the biggest piece of advice I would have is reading over your notes the same day that you took them. There are some things called mnemonic devices. These are memory aids to help you out. One is using a hierarchy, which is forming stuff into categories and then subdividing them into subcategories. That's a good technique to study. And another one is called chunking, organizing items into familiar manageable units. So you can try to memorize. If you didn't chunk, you would just try to remember this long list of numbers. But if you chunk them, you would chunk them into these dates. And because you studied history, you would easily remember these dates. Another chunking technique is also known as the first letter technique. Maybe you learned this with the colors of a rainbow: red, orange, yellow, blue, green, or blue, indigo, violet. All right, that's the end of this screencast. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, see me or email me. Thanks. Bye.